Yeah, hopefully you guys are doing very well, and thank you just so much for spending the time out of your day to listen to another Sunday school message. And so today we will be discussing is God's presence with you. And so yes, that is the topic for today. And so let's dive into it. Cue intro. So onward with the message today. I want to ask you guys a couple of questions before we begin. Actually, number one is, how is God present in your life? I mean, today we're going to be talking about, is God's presence with you, or did He promise to be with you, or every one of us in general? But that's one question, and so be thinking about that as we continue to go along through this message. And number two is what is the last advice, or I guess any advice in this case, that you gave to someone else? And why did you give that advice to someone else? And another question is, does God give us advice? And if He does, why? Why does He give us advice? Well, usually when you give someone advice, it's like they ask you for something, or you're trying to prevent something that will occur to them if you don't give them this advice. So in a say, it's a warning sign to them, saying, hey, stop that before it's too late and I can't help you anymore, or hey, stop that or else you'll get in trouble. And so it's like a warning sign when you give someone else advice. And so has God given us warning signs before? Or I guess since we've been following up with the Israelites, has God been warning the Israelites at all about things that they shouldn't do? Well, of course. And so why does He do that? Why does He give us advice? Well, when God gives us warning signs, it's His grace. Of course, He doesn't want anything bad to happen to us or the Israelites in particular. And so He extends His grace out to them because He doesn't want them to falter or to be led to destruction. And so that's why He warns them so much. First, because He is gracious to the Israelites. And number two, it's a test. It's to test to see if the Israelites will know good from bad. And so it's in a way testing their faith to see if they actually do have faith in God and trusting that His warning signs are actually true. And so today's passage, we will be in Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 14 through 23, and Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 44 through 47. And so follow along again and as I read it, okay? All right.
Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, the time for you to die is near. Call Joshua and present yourselves at the tent of the meeting, that I may commission him. So Moses said to Joshua, went out and presented themselves at the tent of the meeting. The Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud, and a pillar of cloud stood at the doorway of the tent. The Lord said to Moses, behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers, and this people will arise and play the harlot for the strange gods of the land, in the midst of which they are going. And I will forsake me and break my covenant, which I have made with them. Then my anger will be kindled against them in that day, and I will forsake them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed. And many evils and troubles will come upon them, so that they will say in that day, it is not because our God is not among us, that these evils have come upon us. But I will surely hide my face in that day, because the evil which they will do, for they will turn to other gods. Now therefore, write this song for yourselves, and teach it to the sons of Israel. Put it on their lips, so that this song may be witness for me against the sons of Israel. For when I bring them into the land flowing with milk and honey, which I swore to their fathers, and they have eaten and are satisfied and become prosperous, then they will turn to other gods and serve them, and spurn me and break my covenant. Then it shall come about, when many evils and troubles have come upon them, that the song will testify before them as a witness, for it shall not be forgotten from the lips of their descendants. For I know the intent which they are developing today, before I have brought them into the land which I swore. So Moses wrote this song the same day, and taught it to the sons of Israel. Then he commissioned Joshua, the son of Nun, and said, Be strong and courageous, for you shall bring the sons of Israel into the land which I swore to them, and I will be with you. Then Moses came and spoke all the words of the song in the hearing of the people, he with Joshua the son of Nun. When Moses had finished speaking all these words to Israel, he said to them, Take your heart all the words which I am warning you today, which you shall command your sons to observe carefully, even all the words of this law. For it is not an idle word for you, indeed it is your life. And not by this word you will prolong your days in the land which you are about to cross the Jordan to possess.
Alrighty, so amen to those scriptures that were just read. And so I guess breaking it down further little by little, you could say in chapter 31, verse 14 through 18, it was actually God commissioning Joshua to be a leader instead of Moses. You know how Moses brought the Israelite people out? Well, now it's Moses is coming to die. And so they'll need a new leader, in which they're commissioning Joshua to be on. And you could say God was with Moses all this time. And so in this case, it'll God's presence will be transferred from Moses to Joshua, since Joshua was going to lead his people. And so that was in a sense God's presence with Joshua, I guess commissioning him that God will be with him no matter what happens. Also, it's they are very close to the promised land as well, because you guys know when Moses he won't get to see the promised land at all, which Joshua will. And so they're coming into the promised land now. But then God warned them this one. He said, when you guys enter into the promised land, you guys will forget all about me, and you guys will turn to idols instead and worship them instead. And that God will, you could say he will leave them for a little bit until they remember that everything that they've done, as in the sin that they've done is not God's fault, but their fault. And so they will turn back to God and you could say come back and worship him. And so with chapter 31, verse 19 through 22, it talks about God telling them to, I guess, make a song so that they will remember all these things that God has said about how when they enter into the promised land, they will turn to other gods. And so he said make a song. He didn't say tell them. He said make a song so that they will remember. And so I guess one example, is it easier to remember this? How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God. Now compare it to this. How great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God. Oh, we'll see how great is our God. And so moving onward from this thing, a little passage in there mentioned that God will leave them for a little bit. His presence will not be with them for a little bit. But yet, you say, Mike, wait, this message is about God's presence with us, right? Then, why would he leave us if he said that he was always going to be with us? His presence was going to be with us. Why would he leave us? Well, the thing is, if God was with them, he would help them. He have no choice but to help them through their situation and help turn them back to God. But in this case, God needed to discipline them. All right, they needed to go through hardships and all that stuff to really figure out and remember God's goodness toward them. And they're like, oh man, the sin is not going the way that I initially planned it to go. And I sinned because I thought it will bring me better things. But then, of course, they will. Of course, coming to find out, when you do sin, it's it actually turns you away from God, and you don't get satisfied from it all, and so it leaves you very empty inside. But yet God is the only one who can satisfy and all that, and so that's why they ended up turning back to God after they've been punished with dissatisfaction, or maybe they suffered a lot from doing their sin and worshiping other idols. And so that was God's purpose of actually leaving the Israelites for that time a little bit. And so with the last passage of today, it's chapter 32, verse 44 through 47, Moses is talking back with the Israelites, and this is after he's taught them that song that God told them to remember about the troubles and the times that they're going to turn back to God is coming. Well, for that one, Moses says it's not just because God wants your obedience that's important to him. It's important because it's important for you, your life in general. It's like this is life-threatening stuff that you need. That's why you need this song, because it foreshadows a whole bunch of stuff that could occur if you don't follow it. And so God has been blessing the Israelites all this time, but yet God won't bless sin. And worshiping other idols, that's sin, and God won't bless it. And so He cannot bless sin, because that's not who He is. And so He desperately wants to bless the Israelites, but then He can't bless them if sin is in place. And so it's like without God's blessing, they're in for a rude awakening. I mean, Moses going to save them from Egypt, that's a blessing. Moses, parting the Red Sea, that's a blessing. Feeding them in the wilderness, that's a blessing. And even getting to the land itself, that's a blessing. And so without God's blessing, they wouldn't go anywhere. They wouldn't have anything they have without God's blessing. And so if sin is a part of their lives, then there is no blessing. And so that is how detrimental following that song is to the Israelites. And so I hope you enjoyed this lesson. That was all I have for today. And so I pray that you have a good week, and you guys are beginning school again or have already begun. It's just the beginning, but yet it'll come very sooner than you expected. So just hang on in there, and you have my prayers. All right? So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. All right. Bye-bye.